Confession 6. Retrospective Regret. The sprint retrospective began as usual. During the sprint, the team had many discussions regarding our processes and practices. For this reason, I knew that there would be some passionate points brought to the table. The process we ran was to ask two simple questions. What worked this sprint? And what could be improved next sprint? Each team member would then have a chance to speak, just like in the stand-up meeting, while others would remain silent or on occasion chip in very briefly. Giving each team member space to talk ensured that we all had a chance to speak. The team usually found it difficult to avoid talking over each other and keep to the time box, so I would often need to step in to politely get each member to wrap up their point. "Okay, who'd like to start?" I asked. John looked ready to go. "I've got a few things to say," he said. I replied, "Okay, John, go for it." I had an idea of what to expect from him. "Firstly, planning," he began. "Let's cast our minds back to the past few sprints. We always discuss use of that software tool. We always say that it doesn't work. Then in each retrospective we forget to mention it. I think we should stop using it. It wastes our time. It drives me nuts that we have to wait for it to load the stories. It's quicker to write on paper. That's why when people take notes during a meeting, they jot down the notes in shorthand. They don't bring a computer into the room. We've got to ban that tool." John made passionate speeches that the team could relate to. This, coupled with the fact that he had been at the company for years, earned him a lot of trust from the team, who had been together under a month and knew nothing about Scrum before they began at the company. They nodded their heads, looking to see my reaction. I agreed with many things John said, but not all. I felt passionate. I was looking at things from many perspectives, not just mine or his. I fully respected the team, but I knew that product owners at the company had a habit of, frankly, not doing their jobs. This may sound harsh, and believe me, I think product owners are often undervalued in Scrum. However, many in this business were often anti-Scrum and resistant to change. They were also usually very direct and tough characters. To balance that, I have worked with dozens of pleasant ones who embrace change. The planning tool made it easier for the product owner to update the backlog from anywhere. However, no product owner was going to admit that their productivity would go down if the tool were taken away with Martha, our product owner, at the retrospective. Given that product owners were often absent, this would have introduced serious overhead on a critical project. The business would inevitably blame the technology department, as was usual on other projects. On top of this, at least one member of the team was permanently off-site. The tool allowed him to fully collaborate efficiently and to see the sprint board at all times. After considering John's point, I replied, "Okay, John, I do see what you mean. We can do without the tool. I started off in Scrum without any software tools, so I definitely know it can work. Just bear in mind that the tool does have some value. With it, the backlog can be updated from anywhere. Some of your colleagues who work from home can update it without asking you. It makes sure that we never lose our tasks. It automatically generates a burn down. It also has a searchable history of all bugs, issues, tasks, and stories created since the beginning of the project. So we can get rid of the tool, but I want us to be mindful of the pros and cons." Claire spoke up. "Well, that's not the point, is it? We think it's wasting time." Claire's response disappointed me. I had listened to the team and taken on board their points. I could see that some of the team members either did not think I was listening or were not listening to me, or both. Within minutes, everyone was talking and expressing views out of turn. Only Judy and Sammy, the testers, were not talking. They had been the most open to change and had very different personalities than the others. They always used reason and were rarely angry or worked up unless someone went out of their way to annoy them. They also rarely openly disagreed with the developers about issues of process. Even when they disagreed, they would rather come talk to me rather than voice their opinions in the retrospective. The only time they did strongly disagree was if there was an issue of product quality, since it was their job to be vocal about that. Even in this case, they were polite at all times, which I respected. The two testers watched quietly while everyone raised their voices one after the other. "Everyone, one at a time, please. Gordon, it's your turn," I said loudly to get the room under some kind of order. Gordon spoke. "Look, obviously the tool is a bottleneck. No one wants to see one person typing. Why don't we just ban the tool from meetings? We can use it outside of them. People reluctantly nodded. Good idea, I said. Do bear in mind, though, that we will have both a tool and paper. This will mean we'll have to print the cards out to keep them in sync. My gut feeling tells me this will slow us down in the meeting if cards are not prepared, since we already have trouble starting on time as it is. Everyone started speaking over each other again. Martha, the product owner, got involved in the discussion. "Oh, come on, it'll be easy," she said. "Look, I'll do it. I'll print the cards out and cut them out for the meeting." The thing to realize about Martha was that she resented the times when I had constantly reminded her to maintain the backlog. Martha was unfortunately not well liked at the company due to her short temper. I was clearly not her favorite person because I often chased her to make sure that she was doing her job as a product owner. Many other Scrum Masters did not spend the time to do this, and it frustrated her. Because of this, she would rarely agree with me. I could see the room was about to erupt again. I gracefully allowed the team to do things their way. I thought that if it were a bad decision, the results would make that apparent. The meeting was about to end and only 3 people had spoken. The others made very quick points since they were pressed for time. We left the room with an agreement to stop using the tool in the planning meetings. This practice was to begin the very same day. I started the planning meeting on time, but the team and I had to wait for Martha to arrive. She was 10 minutes late, which was the usual case. I was aware that she often had a busy schedule, so I never complained or embarrassed her about this. However, we could not start the meeting without her since she had the stories. She arrived with printouts of the stories on A4 paper. As she had not found the time to cut the paper into individual stories, we started the meeting with doing that. This lasted 20 minutes. Martha then discovered that she had forgotten some of the printouts. Printing them took about 10 more minutes. Sprint planning that day finished without resolution due to a lack of time. The team agreed that planning had been far too slow that day. For the next retrospective, we all agreed to print the story cards on an A4 sheet and not to cut them out. This worked out much better going forward. Lessons learned. The retrospective is a great opportunity for the team to drive their own improvements. As a facilitator, my approach is to ask the team what worked and what could be improved, and leave it to them to come up with ideas. I usually give my coaching and suggestions at the end, answering any queries from the team. This story ties into the issue certain members of the team had with using a tool, but primarily it shows how retrospectives can be ruined or sidetracked when we become passionate and lose focus on facilitating the team. Allow the team to learn from their own mistakes and solve problems. In the story, I give the team good reasons why I think the tool is the right way to go, but they are not convinced. In this situation, sometimes the best course of action is to let the team try their own solution. This is often the only way to give them peace of mind. Also, in the end, they adapted and came up with a completely different solution which also worked for them. I should have remembered that the team are a group of experts and problem solvers. Presenting the use of tool versus the use of paper as a problem to solve would likely get a much better response from them. Time box the meeting strictly and suggest a new meeting for important points. This repeats a previous point within the class, but a very important one. Once we get in the habit of letting meetings run long, the process starts to become disorganized and loses its efficiency. In this story, only 3 people had adequate time to air their views. The others may have left harboring frustrations that would carry into the next sprint. I should have either time-boxed the meeting more strictly and booked a separate meeting, or asked the team if they were willing to sacrifice more time for the discussion. Getting them to decide and obtaining their buy-in would ensure that they leave the meeting without frustration. Transparency, or discuss any issues with your product owner. This ties into my point about having a good relationship with the product owner. It is especially important for a Scrum Master, but the same goes for the team and stakeholders, to invest a great deal of time in the product owner. When we meet people with personalities we find difficult, it is easy to overlook their point of view. However, you may find that a friendly one-to-one discussion will bring you together as a team. You will notice in this story that I did not hold any separate discussions with Martha. However, Martha owns the backlog. If I had spoken to her and found a way to voice my concerns, she would have likely come up with her own helpful ideas and been more positive in the retrospective.